What is going on, everyone? Commodore last here. I wanted to do a separate discussion video in regards to my thoughts on One Piece chapter 1098. Now, we had the reaction review a few days ago. You got to see my initial thoughts, my first reaction to the events of 1098. And, you got to see a side of anger, the rattle, honestly, when it comes to me and what I experienced in that chapter. Even though we try to find some joy, some kind of hope in the abyss, we've been told that the doom awaits. And I don't want to wait until 1099 to figure out what's going on and discuss those things when they happen. I want to go over my thoughts on the chapter itself, what we experienced in it, and what we should be expecting to go down in the next chapter. But before we get into all of that, make sure to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with everything goes here on the channel in regards to my coverage of One Piece week in, week out, with the manga every single week and the anime on occasion during certain events when they're going down. And make sure to leave a like on the video so I know you guys are enjoying the content. That way I can continue doing things like this and, maybe other discussion videos in regards to other things you would like to see from me. Let's get into talking about 1098. If you want to talk about candidates for the darkest chapters in all of One Piece, I would reckon that this right now is the darkest that we've seen. There's a good chance that what we're going to experience in the next few could maybe even go to another level. I would say 1099 has a great chance of being that. I still can't believe that Ginny had to go through what she had to go through, right? Being captured by the Celestial Dragons, being forced to wed a Celestial Dragon, being in their presence for 2 years, bearing a child, that child being Jewelry Bonnie, and it's just sickening, man. I absolutely despise NTR. I despise cucking in stories. I don't wish that on my enemy. I'd rather throw hands with you. I'd rather go and fight you to the ends of the earth. But to wish that kind of stuff on you, man, is just crazy. Oda using that kind of story element, placing that on Ginny to get some kind of reaction out of us, the readers. For the small amount of time that she's been there, you had to get something there. And I never thought that Oda would go down that route. I never thought it would actually happen. The fact that he actually went through with it brought a level of anger that I didn't think I would bring out while reading that chapter. And I felt so horrible for this character and what she had to go through, and then knowing that she went through the whole stuff with the sapphire scale, which we know fell onto Bonnie afterwards later on in her life. And the person that I hurt for the most in all of this is Kuma. Kuma had a genuine love for Ginny, knowing that he never got to say a proper goodbye to her face to face. By the time that he pulled up to the church, back to the place that they felt was home to them, and seeing her pass on, covered in the scales, in her demise, I felt so bad for her, man. If you looked at that moment and you didn't cry or just didn't feel like your heartstrings starting to tug, I question your humanity a little bit. After all that, knowing that he has to raise someone else's kid, right? It's not his actual biological child, the daughter of the woman that he loved, that he cared for, the one person he considered to be one of his closest friends. And, he could have made that his lover. But the problems that he had with his Buccaneer blood. He didn't want to go through what his race had gone through, what his family had gone through. Especially seeing what happened with his dad and all that. He did not want to experience that on his kids. Knowing that with the relationship he has now with Bonnie, it's like, my God, man. It's just pain. As much as Oda tried to do in that chapter, show the joy that they have together, the little father and daughter moments, them enjoying the time that they have together, doing up the dancing for Nika and all that. It's just it was beautiful. But that the pain awaits. And it goes into the sapphire scale stuff after. The doctor saying that, the chance of her being alive after 10 is obsolete. It hurts knowing that these characters are going through that. And Kuma not being able to tell Bonnie that there's no chance you're going to survive this. And of course now we know her actual age. So it brings up a lot of conversations in regards to, what happened to her back then versus where things are right now. Going off what happened at the end of this week's chapter leading into 1099 makes me question a lot of things in regards to that. Before we jump into those details, I want to discuss my thoughts on the whole thing with Dragon, his lack of action and why he didn't go to save Ginny at the time. Honestly, I was rattled by that, right? Initially in the moment when I read that, I was like, how could you allow something like that to happen? I'm not asking you to go guns blazing, even though at the time I did say that. You can still do the infiltration. You could do something at the very least to try and help Ginny out and not let her go through what she had to go through for 2 years. And then that's it. She's finished. She's completely done at that point. She's passed on. She's taken the same disease that took her life, that's now gone into her daughter after. It's bro, Dragon, why? Why didn't you go out and do something, man? Now that I think about it a bit more, and I didn't really want to take in that mindset, but now that I've really seen the situation a little bit better, it makes sense why Dragon didn't make that move. If this was Luffy, he was going to try and jump straight to Mary Joie, handle business, doesn't matter what reckless decisions he makes, he knows that it's going to be taking care of somebody. Dragon's someone that is not going to sacrifice all the things that he's building up to save one person when the goal is to save everyone. And I know that there may be some kind of, questioning in regards to that kind of mindset between him going to save Kuma now in the story compared to having the opportunity to do so with Ginny and not going through with it. Now that I kind of look things a little bit differently, it's like, okay, they weren't at the level that they are right now currently in the story. Dragon wasn't the most dangerous criminal in the world at that point in time, I would imagine, right? Unless, again, looking at the timeline stuff, maybe it was the case. But with the freedom fighters, their transition into the revolutionary army, they were kind of getting into that phase where they're kind of molding themselves. They're creating what exactly they're supposed to be. Still, it's in its infancy, right? You don't want to jeopardize that thing. So I understand why Dragon didn't make that move. It's just one of those where it's like, it's tough to see something like that occur, knowing that you can't do anything about it and knowing that it's going to sit within your heart for as long as possible. And until the moment of time when he's going to go out there and get the retribution he wants to be able to liberate the people that have gone through the suffering and demise at the hands of these people, the world government, the celestial dragons with Imu and all that. I really do hope that Oda decides to give Dragon the time that he needs to show himself out, because my god, the man's been hyped for such a long period of time. I would be sick to know that this guy who's been talked about, considered to be on the level of Roger in terms of influence, in terms of danger factor and all that, not going out there and being the guy that he claims to be or who the story is telling you that he is, and doesn't go and do those things. I really am hoping that Oda doesn't allow that to be a missed opportunity, best way to say it. I really do hope that Dragon's able to show himself there. I know in the moments of this Jenny stuff, it's like he didn't do it because he didn't want to ruin his operations or ruin something that he was trying to build. To sacrifice one person to save everyone, or to go after one person but you sacrifice everyone, it's like you couldn't do that, right? Luffy might be doing that kind of stuff because that's in his mindset. He's wanting to protect the people that are close to him. Doesn't matter the consequences, the actions that he does. Dragon, whole different ball game with that. So that's my thoughts on the whole thing in regards to Dragon. I'm at peace now with everything that's happened there in regards to him. And, if he's biding his time for the right moment, to have his own Crollo Lucifer Requiem in terms of him trying to get the revenge that he seeks, and maybe just the liberation itself. This isn't just for the people of today. It's for the people that passed on back in the day, the ones he couldn't save. It's for everyone that had to go through the atrocities at the hands of the Celestial Dragons. So that's my thoughts on the Dragon portion. The whole stuff that's going on though with Bonnie, it does bring up a lot of questions. There's a significant difference to her back then versus her right now, and I think the most obvious one is what happened after the Sapphire Scale. I think the most likely situation that occurred in regards to her having the stone on her cheek versus her having the ring now, I think will come into 1099 and what exactly happened then, because we know with King Bakori, he has made his return to Sorbet Kingdom. He's causing more of a ruckus now than ever before. Kuma, who, taking care of his daughter, all the stuff that's going on with her disease, and now having to deal with King Bakori's return. I would imagine that whatever happens in 1099 is going to lead to Kuma getting his actual epithet of the Tyrant. I did talk about this before in the Sorbet Kingdom video in regards to what I think the backstory is supposed to be about, but I think more so now because we're seeing the actual details before us in the story, I think it makes the most sense now that we're going to see exactly what that is, right? Bonnie did say at the time, it's a lie. They call him the Tyrant, but he was never like that. He was the nicest guy in the world. Because of the way that Oda is going with this backstory at the moment, and the way that things are being presented, elements that you don't really see from him, the tragedy that it is, it very much reminds me in ways of Umineko, where you're told one thing is happening in the story, but once you go a little bit more deeper, you find out that the truth that you think you know isn't the truth, and when you actually get to it, it is the most heartbreaking stuff in the world. I would imagine that this is what Oda's going to do with Kuma, is that we're going to see something tragic happen in this backstory that's going to lead to him becoming the Tyrant. The likely situation that I can think of in regards to what could happen in 1099, based on everything that's happening at the moment, is very likely that Bonnie at that time did die, that she dies in the midst of what's going on in the Sorbet Kingdom. And I would probably link it towards the likes of Asura's Wrath, for those who've ever played the games. It's a very pivotal moment that Asura just loses mind. His whole being, he just doesn't care. All he cares about is destruction. And I would imagine that in the moment that Bonnie does die in this flashback, whether it's because of the Sapphire Scale or she's probably killed in the midst of what's going on in the Sorbet Kingdom, Kuma finally breaks. That the Buccaneer himself finally loses all control and goes on a killing spree that leads to him getting the epithet of the Tyrant, going against what we have been told by Bonnie that he's not exactly like this, but because of certain details that we're going to flesh in a little bit more, these things ended up happening because of Bonnie's death, and that leads to Kuma going through what he had to go through during that time that leads him getting his epithet of the Tyrant. Where does that go from there? With Bonnie's death and now Kuma being the Tyrant, how do we get Bonnie in the current timeline versus what happens to her in the flashback? And I would imagine that's where Dr. Vegapunk comes into the mix. We know that whatever happened between Vegapunk, Kuma, and Bonnie has led to the current situation that we're at right now. I would imagine that the most likely situation from this is that Kuma had sacrificed himself in exchange for granting a second chance at life for Jewelry Bonnie, maybe in the form of a clone substitute. We know that Vegapunk has discovered the origins of life, the DNA and all that. It's possible he may have been able to create a separate body to implement the memories and all the things, the likeliness, the personality of Jewelry Bonnie into this said body, and allowing Bonnie a second chance at life post Sapphire Scale. But it would have to come at a cost of Kuma having to go through this whole project of the pacifistas, and by doing so he gives up everything that was once that relationship, that bond, that family ties that he had with Bonnie, giving her the life that she should have had in exchange for his own. That's exactly the route that Oda wants to go through. If you see me tear up in 1098 through the moments that we got to experience, I don't know what kind of mindset I'm going to be in. I might be the most broken down I've ever been, right? There are very few moments in this story that have brought the realest of emotions out of me, and I think something along those lines would be the finishing touch. It would be one of the most devastating, most heartbreaking moments in all of One Piece, and I don't know if I can ever recover from it, especially knowing that we're going into 1100 very soon. This flashback may only have a chapter or two to go, depending on how the pacing is going to be. I would very much think that this is exactly along the lines that we could see things going for this flashback, that Kuma more than likely is going to end up sacrificing his life in exchange of that. In terms of him going into the pacifist project, allows Dr. Vegapunk to be able to do the experimenting that's needed to perform a second chance at life for Bonnie. Whether she's on death's door, whether she has died, all depends on exactly where Oda wants to go with that. We know that Bonnie has said before that she has been to, Egghead. She's seen this place before and all that. Maybe there's a chance that whatever the distant memories that are left over, her mind from that time are what she still remembers, but the actual truth, now that she's seen the flashback, now that she's gone and attacked Saturn, is because she knows the truth of what happened. Yeah, those are pretty much all my thoughts in regards to, Dragon, how I feel about him and his lack of action and why he didn't do what he did versus what he could have done, and hoping that the hype in his character is still going to be fine. And at the same time, what I think is going to transpire with the stuff in regards to Kuma, what I think is going to end up happening with Bonnie during these events in the Sorbet Kingdom, and where we go from there. But I am excited to see what happens in 1099 and how it's going to lead up to the big moments that's going to come at chapter 1100. I would assume that we're going to get a correlation of what happened back in Sabaody with Luffy punching St. Charlos. I would imagine that if he is hearing these things, that he gets some kind of glimpse of what's exactly happening with Bonnie and the whole flashback, that he's probably going to lay the smackdown on Saturn. I would imagine that's going to be the case. And in terms of a correlation, in terms of a parallel moment to what we saw with Charlos, I would imagine that's going to happen there with Luffy and Saturn. Let me know down in the comments below how we're feeling about the events of chapter 1098. Let me know where you guys stand in regards with Monkey D. Dragon. Do you think that he did the right thing by not going and saving Ginny, or he should have done that and gone to Marijoa, risking his operations and going there to save her at the expense of possibly losing the Revolutionary Army? And regardless of what's going on with Kuma and with Bonnie at the ends of this flashback, do you think that what I talked about here is the likely route that we're going to see at the end of this flashback, or do you have something else in mind? Please let me know down in the comments below. Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new here. If you want to be a part of the weekly experience when it comes to my coverage of One Piece week in and week out, subscribe if you haven't already. Click on the bell of Shandor to stay up to date with everything goes on the channel. And with that being said, I will catch you guys in the next video, and hopefully the despair is not going to be too strong. But I would imagine that if we've only gone to the halfway point of this flashback, I would imagine that the rest of this is going to be chaotic. And hopefully there will be some joy at the end of it, because if not, it is a worry dot for me. But Commodore last signing off. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, take care. Going crazy, yeah, we go.